We before we take this next call,
Sure.
I've noticed that the morality issue has come up, and I'd like to throw in something from what I was going to say before we get to the next one. I had a tendency to turn to my parents a lot for the big philosophical questions, partly because they were actually really good at answering them. And I've heard a stereotype of atheists that says, and this is kind of a side note, but I've heard a stereotype a lot that there's this pop psychology that says, oh, I know what atheists are. They're people who didn't get along with their fathers. And they're acting out some kind of hatred of their parents by pretending not to believe in God or convincing themselves they don't believe in God. And of course, I always laugh when I hear that because I have one of the best relationships with both my parents that I know of. Well, I remember when I was a preteen, I was reading a book that I think influenced my thinking a lot, not just because of what was in the book, but because of what the conversation I had with my dad later. I was a big fan of Lloyd Alexander when I was a kid, and he wrote a fantasy series called the Prydain series, which you may know from a Disney movie from the 80s called The Black Cauldron. They did a terrible job with it. But anyway, in the fourth book, the kid who's the center of the book kind of grows up, and it's called Taran Wanderer, and he goes around the world looking for his heritage. And he falls in with this wizard named Morda. And this guy is a really excellent villain. I mean, he's just completely contemptuous about the human race in general. He considers himself sort of out of their league, above, completely above them, superior in every way, and he doesn't have contact with them. And when occasionally somebody does stumble across where he lives, he doesn't think twice about doing something really nasty to them. And he gives this characteristic villainous speech where he talks about how pitiful and insignificant and also evil themselves the entire human race is. And reading this left me feeling very depressed. I mean, I suppose if I were raised religious, I might be able to think about this and say, nonsense, humans are created in the image of God, and God is good by definition, so I know that humans are good. Or, no, actually, Christians believe that humans are inherently evil. But
that being born is a sin.
But they're going to go to heaven, so some of them, and as long as you're a Christian, you're cool. I didn't have anything like that, and that speech was actually kind of persuasive to me. And I don't mean that I wanted to go be a villain, but I was like, man, I gotta think of some way to justify my existence. And I went to my dad and I asked, why, what's the point of doing all the stuff that we do in our lives? This villain in this story just made me think like everything in life is pathetic and a waste of time. And he said, no, look, life is basically a series of experiences that happens to you. And many of those are good experiences, and being alive is a better thing than not being alive. There are all kinds of wonderful things you can do. I mean, you enjoy fine meals and listen to great music and fall in love. And basically, the more experiences you have in life, the better. And so I think that if I can be an old man about to die, and I can look back in my life and be satisfied and think, yeah, I did some great stuff, then I've lived a good life by my own standards.
Yeah, one of the other issues with regard to morality, that kind of goes to value of life, but this claim that you can't have morality without, a God and God's little guidebook. The fact of the matter is that everybody goes about determining their morality in exactly the same way. You don't get to pretend that just because you have accepted this moral guidebook that you have done so because of divine authority. How do you tell the difference between things attributed to God and things attributed to the devil? I mean, if you read through, for example, the Christian Bible, there's plenty of things that are attributed to God, which I consider to be immoral, both in action and in deed, in words. The truth of the matter is that you've gone through and you've read it and you've said, I judge this to be good. and then you've kind of taken the shortcut, and once you've made that decision, you presume that everything else in there is also good, which is just the lazy man's way of dealing with morality. And the honest truth is that everybody goes about doing it in exactly the same way.
And
Everybody
I can prove
determines, yeah.
We don't stone unruly teenagers to death.
Yeah.
We just don't do it. And if you ask people, why don't you follow this law in the Old Testament, then what they say is, well, that's the Old Testament and God's law overrode that. But they don't say it overrode the Ten Commandments. So obviously there's some kind of standard going on which is not specifically mentioned in the Bible. Going through the Old Testament, there's a lot of stuff that might sound frankly barbaric, and I've heard people go through all kinds of good reasons to disregard them. But I mean, basically, it comes down to you've got a standard which isn't the Bible. You've got your own ideas about what's right and wrong, and when you read a passage like, Jesus saying, if you would be good, then sell all your belongings and go be a hermit, or whatever he said. Sell all your belongings and go give your money to the poor and spend the rest of your days being broke and doing good works. You are free to think, well, obviously Jesus didn't mean that for me, because you don't just take the Bible as your morality source.
The passages say what they say. No debate, no discussion. They say what they say. The difference is in the person, and it's the reason why you have thousands of different denominations of Christians. It's the reason why one person can look at this and say these things are immoral and these things are moral, and somebody else can disagree with them. I look at this and I say there are tons and tons of immoral things here. There are some morally good things in here. The difference is I don't need to accept any of this as an authority, because I recognize that the judgment in determining what's moral and immoral here comes from me. And as long as that's the case, I can chuck all of this and still keep, the things that I think are good and the things that I think are evil can be dismissed.